We are looking at a passage from 2 Corinthians 4. The church in Corinth gave Paul more trouble than all the other churches that he founded. We have difficulty understanding exactly what the problem was because the book of Acts mentions only one visit by Paul to Corinth. That was when the church was established, and it does not say anything about any of Paul's letters or his dealings with the church. So we have to read Paul's letters and try to deduce what the relationship and the problems were all about. To begin with, we're not sure how many letters Paul wrote to Corinth. 1 Corinthians 5:9 says, "I wrote to you." So 1 Corinthians apparently was not his first letter to them. Remember, Paul's writings were not regarded as Holy Scripture in his lifetime. When a church got a letter from him, they didn't act like it was any different from any other letter. And of course, they only had one copy. So we don't know what facilities they had to store written material. Most likely, a letter would have just been tossed in a basket of some kind. So preservation of writings in those days was chancy at best. We know of at least one other letter of Paul's that was completely lost. He refers to this in Colossians 4. In 2 Corinthians 2:4, Paul says, "I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart." Scholars refer to this as what was called the stern letter, which also appears to be lost. What we call 2 Corinthians is choppy. The argument is sometimes hard to follow, and it may contain portions of some letters that were blended together when they were recopied. Scholars reckon that Paul wrote anywhere from 4 to 6 letters to the church in Corinth. By the time a canon of his letters was recognized in the early 2nd century, we were down to the 2 that we have. It seems that opposition to Paul had arisen in the Corinthian church, apparently led by some Jewish Christians from Jerusalem and by some local person. There was a pretty large contingent of Jews in Corinth. We have to remember that not everyone in the early church considered Paul to be the great apostle. He had been Saul the Pharisee, the persecutor. His conversion and rejection of Mosaic elements such as the law and circumcision did not sit well with some early Christians. As he does in Galatians, Paul here is asserting his claim to be an apostle and to be preaching true Christian doctrine. We can't fully understand the situation in Corinth because, as he does in all his letters, Paul assumes that the people he's writing to know what he's talking about, and so he does not go into detail. This letter was written in the late 50s AD, we think, and in the passage we're reading today, some scholars find hints that Paul is getting old and tired. His ministry is becoming something of a battle. So it'll be interesting to read this in that context. So as we look at the passage as it's printed in our bulletin now. "For what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may also be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you." This is the word of the Lord.